All right, folks, welcome back to the High Octane Dads Podcast. We're rolling at episode 29 today. Chris is going to be joining us a little bit later. He had some stuff going on this morning, so we're going to go ahead and start recording. I'm going to run through a lot of the racing, automotive news, and things that we've got, and then we will pick up with Chris a little bit later on. So jumping right in, we'll get started with NASCAR. A little bit of controversy this week that I thought was a little bit interesting to talk about. So Christopher Bell was leaving his pit stall, and this was after multiple events where wheels had come off, tires had been shredded, just all sort of things happening out on the racetrack. And he made an unexpected pit stop into another team's pit box, the number 19, I think. And the reason was the front left didn't get tightened down well enough when he was in his pit box. Crew chief realized it. They let him know, hey, pull off in another box. They're going to tighten the wheel. Now, that's great from a safety perspective. Obviously, you don't want a wheel coming off on the track. And so I think it was the right move, but it really something I think in real time I didn't think a whole lot about. But after watching like Kevin Harvick's podcast, obviously who's been a NASCAR driver, and then listening to Dale Jr.'s podcast as well, like, is it fair? Right? Because you might have a guy out there who doesn't have a teammate. They don't have another pit stall they can just swing in who's going to jump out and tighten that wheel lug for them. And so, it kind of led to the question of like, is it fair to have the ability to do that versus having to, come back around? And then truthfully, if a wheel's loose, can you really come back around? So, I thought that was a little bit interesting. NASCAR's weighed in on it from a perspective of, during the race, right? Like they're talking about penalties. If you end up having to stop into another pit box, basically you would have either you would start at the tail end of the field or you'd get a pass through for pitting outside of your own pit box, which, obviously there was already a penalty for pitting outside of your pit box. So, they've sort of addressed it, but it really kind of, it was an interesting question to think about, like for those guys who don't have a bunch of teammates, like what do you do in those scenarios if you do realize, hey, we didn't get that lug tightened, or, there's some other safety issue with the car before it goes back out on track. One thing I noted, they did mention that if you stop into another team's pit stall to correct a safety issue, and that was actually in their statement. So then that also leaves the question, who decides whether it was or was not a safety issue? Is there a list there? Is there something that versus, hey, we're going to swing in and, make some other adjustment. And now that's going to be part of, a team strategy for these bigger teams, Penske or Hendrick or Joe Gibbs Racing, like not calling anybody out, just saying, if they've got several drivers all on their team, several pit crews, right? Like they could potentially, use that to their advantage in some way. And obviously I'm not a NASCAR driver, so just throwing that out there. I'd be interested to see how that develops and what comes of that. Same as like when Ross Chastain, right, used the wall to just floor it and come around several people years ago. Obviously that resulted in some rules and changes and clarifications. And so this will be a similar thing, but just curious to see where that goes. But this week, all eyes are turning to Homestead-Miami Speedway. They're getting ready to race out there. I'm trying to get my DraftKings lineup ready. I have been enjoying playing around with DraftKings in relation to NASCAR. I don't really do fantasy football, but when it comes to racing, like, I know a little bit more about it. I follow it a little more closely. So it's fun to get in and play and, lose a couple bucks because I'm not great at it anyway. But early picks for this week, obviously, Christopher Bell, William Byron, Kyle Larson, they're always in the top running. They're just strong contenders every race. But, coming off of a win last week, like you can't really count out Josh Berry. He had a really good showing in Las Vegas. And, my Trackhouse Racing, I love those guys. And Daniel Suarez was out in the lead, and Josh Berry managed to come around him at the end. So obviously had a very strong car. And it was great to see those guys get a win. Obviously, that team was very, very excited. Some interesting post-race coverage with Josh Berry where he was talking about why he didn't do burnout. And, to his point, he's like, I come from some, racing teams where, you do a burnout, you tear up something, right? Like that may affect your ability to come and race next week. And it's just kind of, in his nature, he just didn't want to do anything too wild. And I thought that was pretty interesting and kind of a humble reason for that. But his crew came out to greet him, and they had a great celebration there. So that was great to see. But, for the Trackhouse guys last week, Ross Chastain finished fifth, Daniel Suarez second. And you can't count out Shane Van Gisbergen, SVG. Love to see that guy. He's from New Zealand, I think, and just coming in and doing some great stuff, moving up the Cup Series from the Xfinity only. So it should be a great race to watch this week. Curious to see where everybody ends up. So keep an eye on it. If you got any tips for my DraftKings pick before tomorrow, let me know. I'll be watching the qualifying today and see see where we're going from that. But speaking of qualifying, not too long ago, stopped watching the Formula One qualifying for the China Grand Prix, which is running this week. Lewis Hamilton really came out and made a statement this week in his new Ferrari ride. Took pole position for the sprint race and subsequently the win. Incredible performance by him and his team. It's only his second start with Ferrari, coming off of a long career with Mercedes. So it's great to see Lewis Hamilton. And I mean, guy's in his 40s and he's still out there contending, and he's just a natural driver. Regardless of who you root for, you can't deny Lewis Hamilton's ability to drive. And so that's really amazing. And we saw after the Australian Grand Prix, probably one of the reasons why somebody like Lewis Hamilton can come in with such confidence, such ability to drive, and really is just, but isn't isn't arrogant. He's a pretty humble guy, and we kind of saw why. So for those of you who may or may not follow Formula One, a young guy named Isaac Hadjar started with Red Bull Racing. Red Bull Racing is who I've been watching for years because Daniel Ricciardo was a big Dale Earnhardt fan, and so when I started watching F1, it was like that guy's the number 3. Obviously, he's a pretty cool, nice Australian guy, a great race car driver. And so that just kind of, I fell in with Red Bull. But they have brought in Isaac Hadjar to race on their Toro Rosso team. And the conditions in Australia weren't great. And so he actually crashed on the formation lap of the race, which, albeit I can see is frustrating, embarrassing. It's your debut race with in Formula One altogether, not just with a team. But as he was coming off track, he was visibly upset. He was very emotional. He was crying, walking back to the paddock and getting off the track. And later, Helmut Marko, who's one of the advisors for Red Bull Racing, released a statement stating that show of emotion was embarrassing. Now, an old school guy like that, I get it. He's an old school driver. He's won 24-hour Le Mans. At any rate, old school guys, been racing for a long time, and Red Bull is a top performer. They expect the best out of their drivers. But on the flip side of that, Lewis Hamilton's father caught up with Isaac Hadjar as he was headed back to the garage and, just stopped him for a moment and told him, keep your head up, gave him some words of encouragement and said, look, anything can happen. Just, stick with it. And it really shows the type of supportive father and environment that Lewis Hamilton was brought up in. And I got to say, you got to love seeing that kind of sportsmanship, even from the competition, right? Like, they're obviously not on the same racing team, but he took a moment. I mean, at the end of the day, the kid's 20 years old. He's in his first Formula One race ever in a car that's set up to be on the razor's edge of performance and handling. And just, there's a lot that goes into that. Your nerves have to get you. I don't think any of us could even pull one of those cars out of the garage and onto the pit road. So, just keep that in mind. I think it's going to take some time for him to get comfortable in a car like that. But, I think I saw another comment from Marko that said that they're going to, basically wait 3 races and see what happens before they make any decisions. Not unheard of to replace a driver during the year and take that seat. And then, coming into China this week, I'm sure that puts your nerves even more on edge as a young kid starting your debut. So, it's got to be a lot of pressure coming in this week. So we'll see what happens. But looking at the China Grand Prix and qualifying today, Oscar Piastri, who's with McLaren, ended up on pole position. Then his teammate, Lando Norris, actually had second until George Russell and the Mercedes came in and managed to snag second place. So naturally, Norris will be third. Max Verstappen ended up in fourth. Like I said, I'm a Red Bull guy. But then, Lewis Hamilton and the Ferraris right there in fifth, despite a strong showing in the sprint qualifying and in the sprint and winning the sprint race. They made a slight setup change between then and qualifying because obviously you're going to be running a little bit longer in the actual race. And I think it took some of the speed out of the car. So it didn't seem that Hamilton was super happy with that, but, we'll see what happens. What's really interesting to me is this 2025 season for F1 is much more competitive. You got the McLarens, the Red Bulls, Ferraris, and even Mercedes really all running up here at the front of the pack. When I started watching F1 some years ago, Red Bull was sort of a contender, but it was everybody's fighting for, third and fourth. Like, Hamilton was out front and it was all Mercedes all the time. And so it's, it's great if that's your team to see them winning, but you want to see competition. You want to see real racing. And F1 is really delivering on that this year. Next year will probably even more of a shakeup. I think I mentioned this before, but super excited. Cadillac's getting involved and going to be bringing in a car to the 2026 season. And there is some consideration, I don't know if it's for that season, of moving back to the V10s instead of the turbocharged V6s. So could be a very interesting couple of years for F1. I did think I seen something as well that, think Honda, obviously has been involved, and I don't know that, if they move the V10s, I don't think they'll participate. I'm not sure how that worked, but I did see a headline about it. Don't quote me on that. I'll look into it some more and report back on that. Last but not least is our drag racing, NHRA. A lot of stuff going on. Of course, last week was Gainesville. Antron Brown took the win in Top Fuel. Antron Brown's my guy. He's a humble guy, great race car driver, just such a good dude. His signatures on my crown jewel of memorabilia there, my Simpson helmet. He signed it on the back at Gainesville many years ago when I was very young. And, I hold on to that today. I love watching what Antron does, what he's doing for the sport. And so he's coming in as a top contender for sure. They're racing in Phoenix this week, absolutely on fire. Top Fuel world champion last year. But then you've got folks like Tony Stewart who are coming in, and, I don't know what their wins are like. I haven't followed the Top Fuel as closely, but I will say one thing that's very encouraging, and I did see a podcast interview with Tony Stewart pretty recently where, he has a love for motorsport. He moved from NASCAR over to NHRA. He's doing that. He's sponsoring teams and just a guy who absolutely loves racing for what it is. And what I've seen is that while he has a genuine love for motorsports in general, he's just not a fan of where NASCAR as an organization and things are going right now, and hopes to see it, get back to something that he loves again. But at the end of the day, the guy just loves racing. And the problems I think that he has even with NASCAR, right, are generally due to things that maybe are anti-competitive or don't lead to just good racing, which is what the fans want. Like, we want to go out and watch a good race. So he's involved with NHRA. He's doing really well. Of course, we've got Funny Car, at Phoenix is always fun to watch. So it'll be an interesting week to watch out there. Brittany Force, I think, holds that track record still for Top Fuel, and it's going to be a good week for racing for sure. There was one interesting thing for the Top Fuel side of things that I'm curious. I don't know a whole lot about this. If anybody knows about it, let me know in the comments. But they've historically always had what they call the mud flaps, right? They're right in front of the rear tires where the chassis comes back and then it flares out right there. But the chassis itself, I don't think flares out, right? So for the next 4 races, I believe they're actually allowing them to remove those mud flaps if they want. And I'm curious, from an aerodynamic perspective, like on a rail dragster, right? The NHRA is apparently curious about that too, because they're going to be evaluating the effectiveness of reducing rear wheel load without negatively impacting other areas of the car. So if a team chooses not to use the mud flaps, they do have to have some sort of replacement body panel so you don't have bare chassis showing. But other than that, so I'll be curious to see when we start watching, like, how many of them opted to not have that, right? So, yeah, like I said, great week for racing. That's everything that I know so far because I'm a busy dad and I don't get a chance to keep up with all of it. Hopefully that helps you guys if you've been curious about anything. Any other news or things that you guys want to hear about week over week, things that, would be helpful, I'm happy to have them for you. So just throw them in the comments. Let me know what you're interested in. Any other racing, local racing, I would love to be able to know where to focus. There's so many little different sportsmen's groups and things that if I could mention those, shine the spotlight on some of those, like the Southeastern Gassers Association. Like, I know they'll be kicking up very soon. They're going to be in Adel, Georgia. Hopefully I'm going to be down there. I'm planning to shoot video this time. As opposed to just photography. So I really want to get into doing some drag racing video, and excited to go down there because they're always fun to shoot. The cars are so unique, so cool, and the racers are just genuinely great. So I'll keep you posted on what the Southeastern Gassers are doing. I'll post it over on the page. If any of them have an event anywhere in the Southeast near you guys, highly recommend going and checking them out. Again, just awesome group of racers and event promoters and stuff. So not paid to say that or anything, just throwing it out there because they were one of the first like local, bigger group events that we went to, and took my sons and we just had a blast. So definitely go and check them out. And that's all for now. I'm going to pause here. Pretty soon, Chris will be back from doing dad stuff, and then we'll get into our usual shenanigans and other things, and we'll go from there. So see you in a little bit. All right, and we're back. So we did the automotive news. Chris is back from doing dad stuff. So we're ready to get started. So we're going to jump right in. We were having some good discussion about how much I hate my car. And and Chris was like, we should really be recording this. So here we are. We're going to get it going. So welcome back, Chris.
Yeah. We had a softball game this morning, and it was a bit much with the boys. So I dipped out a little early and came back.
I done messed
So,
around and found out that Riverside has a soundboard.
oh,
And
awesome. Yeah, no, so we dipped out a little bit early and come back home. So it's me and the boys here at the house, and they're just destroying everything. But it is what it
that's
is.
dad life, man. That's
Yeah,
part
yeah.
of it. I have a oddly empty house on the weekend. Well, I say empty. I've got one teenager home, but he was probably playing Fortnite till 2, so he's probably still asleep, or he'll
Yeah.
emerge wanting a snack here in a little bit. But
Yeah.
he's so since the last time we had the podcast, I told you he got his license. I know your daughter did too, but it's like he has suddenly, shown an interest. Like he's out washing his truck on the weekends, and he wants to put the subwoofers in it and stuff. And so I got to get a wiring kit for that. But it's good to see he's starting to show that interest, man, and wanting to get out of the house a little more.
So I got home, so I was gone 2 weeks, and my daughter got her driver's license the Friday before I left. I left on the following Monday, and she's been driving her Volvo all over.
And she's already got a ticket.
No, I'm surprised she hasn't, because I've done looked at Life 360 a couple times, and I've had to call her and be like, "Look, you need to slow it down a little bit."
Yeah.
But no, I came home yesterday, and she was home, and I walked by the car. Well, I pulled in the driveway, and the very first thing I saw was she had put her license plate frames on the car that she had bought. And then she's got all these little air fresheners she's then put in the car. She's then plastered the dashboard on the passenger side with Hello Kitty stickers. And I walk by the car and I'm looking at it like, what the hell are we doing? I'm like, whatever.
That was when my daughter first got her Civic. The first thing she's like, I want to get some stickers. She put some on the back glass, and one of them was like, no, you're right. Let's do it the dumbest way possible, or something like that. And I was like, I like that one.
Yeah.
And since then we've gotten rid of that car. Her dad, for Christmas, got her a 97 OBS regular cab, little V6, and she loves that truck. And I'm happy she's got what she's wants. And he did a little bit of work to it for her, and new tail lights, and paint and everything. It looks great. She gets compliments around town in her regular cab truck. But yeah, she loves stickers and stuff like that too. So I get that for sure.
Yeah, I've got a whole box of stickers on my dresser that I need to go through, but a lot of them are stuff that probably shouldn't put that people are going to see.
In my nightstand, I've got I bought a pack of them off like eBay or Amazon or something. And you start going through them, and it's like some of these, you don't want those, like, your kids driving to school, parking in the school parking lot. That's not great. Like,
yeah.
So yeah, I've been through a few of them, and she's gotten a few. And then there's a lot of like anime ones that my youngest, he likes One Piece and Dragon Ball, and there's a bunch of those in there. So they're good for that, but you're going to use maybe a third of what you get.
Yeah. So I guess to hit back on what we were talking about before, that's one thing that I've learned too over the years putting cars together is I like to try to make everything as serviceable as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that way if you got something breaks or whatever, you're not in there like trying to cut the exhaust and fight everything to get shit out.
Yeah.
Like all of my vehicles I've built with V-bands on everything, my Suburban included. It's got V-bands on the exhaust system. So everything comes apart. My Trans Am's the same way. And I know, like you were saying, I think you said the guy that done yours had like welded everything together.
Yeah, man. So I asked for, and he did it in kind of a quick turnaround, but like I had asked for V-bands on the headers, which I bought it's not the Speed Engineering headers. It was the cheap ones that Racing Innovations that were out for a while. And I don't think they make them anymore, but the collector and all, like where it came down on the passenger side, he was like, look, there's no way for me to put a flange on this, even a V-band right here. It's right up against the frame rail. So I'm gonna have to extend it. So he welded a piece of pipe to the end of the collector, and then like beat it flat. And then, which the Engine Masters thing about dinging the headers, whatever, is fine. And so, but like that, now that long tube header is like a ultra long tube header, right?
Yeah.
And then he put just the 3-bolt flanges on everything. Well, on both sides, one of them is like up on the very top, right by the collector. And it's such a pain to get my exhaust out. The whole thing needs to be redone.
Yeah.
To make it a lot more serviceable. Getting the headers in and out are a pain, especially when your passenger side header is this much longer than what it was, at where you bought it. So
yeah, so I had the Racing Innovation headers for a long time, and it was the same way. I went and put V-bands on it. I actually took it to a friend of mine, and he took the time and TIG welded them, and it looked nice. went to put them in the car, and they were hitting the frame. And I
Mhm.
was like, Matt and then we're like, you should have test fitted beforehand. I'm like, yeah. So I ended up like pie cutting it and like turning the collector and then like booger welding it back together. And it worked for years like that, and it was fine. And then I ended up selling them to a local guy who did a swap, and he's still rocking them right now.
Yeah. Well, mine, even the flange you put on there, it's so close to the frame rail. Like that was when I ended up like disabling my knock sensors. I'm pretty sure it was they were tapping, when real under heavy load, they were tapping the frame, and I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
I kept getting knock retard, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. It's not knocking, and I I finally just said, all right, well, I guess I'm turning them off,
Yeah.
and did so, and now they're removed in the trash can where they're supposed to be. So, but yeah, that's the big thing is like I just want to work on my car, but I know every little thing on my car isn't just a single go remove this, remove that, and work on the thing I want to work on. There's so much in the way, and it's just I've not gotten it to the place that it's a serviceable, fun to work on car. And so that's really where my head's at this spring, is just trying to make that little bit better. I got the welder now, so I really need to get in on my exhaust and just redo it myself and be done with it.
Yeah. So I'm hopefully I got the Caprice running right before I left, and I pulled it out yesterday when I came home, been driving around in it. So now I'm going to go pick up a battery, hopefully this weekend or next week for the Trans Am, and I actually want to start driving it some. So I told my daughter that I would pay her to clean the car out for me. And she wants to go out and drive that car, and she wants to learn how to drive stick in it. So she wanted to go drive it last night, and I was like, look, the battery in it's bad right now. It's full of parts and boxes and trash. And there was a moving blanket in the back of the car, and apparently the moving blankets don't hold up to UV light really well. And so now it's like in thousands of little tiny blue pieces all over the car. So that's got to be taken out. It's got to be cleaned. So I told her, help me get the car cleaned out, and we'll start driving it some.
Yeah.
I'm hopefully I want to get a little bit of content with that this summer. I do know I'm going to try to start hitting up a bunch of events this summer, be it autocross, maybe some drag racing events. I know I'm going to try to hit up a bunch of cars and coffees all over the state. But like I said, now I have my weekends free for the most part. And I think I'm going to try to do a couple overnight trips too, to like maybe like the eastern seaboard of my state. They usually have a lot more going on out there by the beach.
Yeah.
So I might do some like Friday night drives when I get off work, go down there and hang out for like Saturday and come home that evening.
Yeah. Atlanta's got a pretty big caffeine and octane event that they do. And most of the guys that go locally, like they end up meeting at like Bucky's or somewhere at like 4:35 in the morning, something absurd. But they meet and go up there. And I had a guy reach out to me and ask if I ever go to that, because he just got a new Lexus, one of their sport models, and it's beautiful. And I was like, well, dude, if I don't make it to caffeine and octane with you, like, let's go do a photo shoot with it. Let's do some video. He wants to do some rollers and stuff. And I was like, man, I said, I've learned a lot about how to do rollers since the last time I was able to go and do them. I just need a good driver to drive while I do it. And really excited to go and do that. And so I'm going to try to get up to that caffeine and octane there. And that's where like, I want to have something cool to drive myself when I go to things like that. And that's kind of kept me from going. Finally, I'm just like, you know what? I'll just get in my truck and go and grab my camera and make that. Speaking of, I got a new camera for for car photography here. Then my Polaroid One Step Plus. I'm gonna see if I can find some. They've got film for it, but it's like $20 for 10 of them or something crazy. Like it's nuts. And so it's like I wonder if it works, but not enough to spend that on it. But that would be cool. But yeah, so I'm gonna try to go to some of that. I know I need to look it up. The Southeast Gassers are coming to Adel, to South Georgia Motorsports Park here pretty soon. But I need to find out the date because that's going to be very soon.
I got a kid sitting here on the table fighting me.
It happens, man.
He's sitting here across the table, leaning his head over my computer, trying to put his head in front of my camera. He's like, "What are you doing, Dad? What are you doing?" Yeah. So yesterday I got this car out. I did the whole broken car shuffle again when I got home. I took the Trans Am for a quick little rip, and that was fun. Then I ended up going out later and started doing some shakedowns with a Caprice. I went to go pick up some pizza for dinner, and I had pre-ordered it, and then parked in the parking lot, walked inside. I was literally in the building in like 3 minutes, and the woman at the register was like, "I think something happened to your car out there," and I'm like, and I started walking out, and there was a girl like parked behind my car and standing there, and I was like, "Oh shit!" And then I walked up. Well, I walked up to her, and she was like, "Hi." So I hit your car, and I'm like, I just washed it, and I was like, "God damn it!" And like I'm like terrified, because Holden, they're expensive as fuck to get parts for. And I was like, man, she's didn't like hit it and like caved in the quarter panel or something. And I'm like, worst case scenario. I walked up, she had backed up and just like bumped like the back corner of the bumper, and it like put a scuff on the bumper and like unpopped it from all the clips on the quarter panel. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, we're good. I went, well, don't, and just like punched it and it popped back into place. And I was like, we're good. And she's like, well, it scuffed it a little bit. I said, there's a cut in the bumper too. That's been there. And she's like, did I do that? I said, no, that's been there. I was like, this bumper's no good. I was like, if it would have been up in the body, I would have made a big deal about it.
Yeah, it would have been expensive to fix, and you need
but
to,
I was like, no, we're good. Go on about your way. I was like, it's like, I get it. Things happen. I mean, like, I almost didn't want to walk outside when,
yeah, it makes you sick.
I was like, oh no. And like, literally, like, I had probably put like 15 or 20 miles on the car since pulling it out. I went through and washed it, cleaned it, vacuumed it out. And, all right. And then I get hit. I'm like,
yeah, your luck sounds like mine.
No, I mean, it worked out, knock on wood, but the gas in the car stunk. Like it just running it. It smelled bad because I filled it up back in November, the day that it broke. And then it's been full, but it's just old shitty, just regular ethanol gas. Well, not regular, but it had 93 just pump gas in it.
Yeah.
And I ended up got some old barium and B12 and poured in the tank and topped it off. And so just been trying to run it out a little bit.
Yeah. Well, some sad news that I just found out.
Uh-oh.
So the Southeast Gassers race in Valdosta in Adel is today. So won't be making that. I knew it was close. Next week is my daughter's prom, and so I didn't really plan a whole lot of stuff right around here. So, but it kind of sucks to miss that one for sure. And I think I mentioned even in the news earlier that like I had planned to go to that one, but now that I'm looking at, for some reason, I was thinking it was either next week and conflicted with prom, or was the week after I was going to be able to go. It was this week, and we were just so busy that it just wasn't going to happen. So they'll be at Shadyside Dragway April 4th, which that's an interesting track. If you've never seen video or pictures of it, like it's a very old school, like outlaw style track. Like in the left lane, like right beside it is a big like concrete barrier wall, and like people are just see it all along the top of that and all down the side of the track. It's like, and where you park, man, it's like a sheer hill that you walk down to get to where the track is. But the last time we went, man, it was so cold. We were miserable. And we drove all the way to see them. And then while we were there, went and saw, or on the next day, we went to the NASCAR Hall of Fame Museum, and that was pretty sweet. So, I mean, we made a good little trip out of it, me, my wife, and my oldest son. But they'll be in Ringgold, Georgia, which is about 3 hours from me in August. So maybe we'll plan to do that. But yeah, man.
Well, that kind of brings me to, I guess we were talking a little bit about some old racing movies.
Yeah, man. I've been on a kick for sure. And so, yeah, I'll intro it because we were going to talk about this. And there's a couple questions around this too. Is like, first off, should car movies and racing movies really kind of be their own thing? Like when you start talking about cool, and then even beyond that, right? Like historical retelling or, historically based versus just a made up movie, right? So when you historically based like Ford v Ferrari, the Gran Turismo movie, even the kid going from running the simulator to winning the competition to racing, all those kind of movies, are set in that sort of thing versus like a Fast and Furious or, things like that. I find when I made my kind of top 10 list here, I lean to those historically based movies. Like I love them. And, so we'll talk about kind of what my top 5 are here in a minute, but yeah, I mean, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on those movies. And then oddly enough, when I was on Google, just looking up a list to see like, maybe there's some I've never heard of. Cause I recently found a movie an old one that I'd never watched and I enjoyed. But when it said like carve them up by subgenre and I clicked history, it showed me Death Race 2, Talladega Nights, and Cars. And I don't think any of those are historical. Maybe Death Race happened somewhere in.
I don't know. Talladega Nights is definitely a top 10.
Oh, it's in, yeah. Oh, yeah. But
shake and bake, brother.
Shake and bake, baby. Yeah, man. I don't know. Like I said, I tend to lean to the historical ones, obviously, and mainly because I'll put this point out there, and then we can talk about our list. But for me, the historically based ones at least try to stay true to racing, and generally the fictional ones err on the side of you've got to suspend disbelief that it's not like how it would really happen, kind of thing. With some exceptions, a lot of racing movies don't get racing quite right. I mean, Fast and Furious being an example, right? Like you don't have 24 gears in your Honda Civic, kind of thing. And I get it's for the cinematic effect, but yeah, don't get me wrong. I have a Fast and Furious movie in my top 10 list, but
yeah,
for different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing if I sit down and really think about it, there's not a lot of movies that come out anymore that are just kind of car movies or car movies that have like a lot of good chase scenes, or like where the main character has like a certain car and they're always like running around, bebopping, racing,
like
running.
Bullet.
Yeah, like Bullet, 2-Lane Blacktop. I don't know if you've ever watched it.
I'm going to say it's a weird freaking movie.
It is. It's got not a great story.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it was about cars and that was cool, but like it is not, it didn't make my list. I'll put it that way. Because it's just there's just no good plot, but.
No, there's no good plot, but as far as like probably for the times and what the car was, you got American Graffiti.
Mm-hmm. Classic.
Which that one had a good story, kind of like a Happy Days type deal is kind of what it reminded me of.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
and then like one thing I do miss is like all the older movies. Like that's why we don't have all those cars are so expensive now, is because they just destroyed. They did all their stunts with the vehicles. Where now it's a lot of CGI, but I think it definitely shows in those movies where you can definitely tell. Like I don't know if you've ever seen it, Death Proof.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that one when we were talking about movies.
That's a good one too. I mean, I'd say within the last 15 years now. I don't remember exactly when it came out, but they had a lot of good action car scenes in it. Well, another good movie would be Vanishing Point. That's what reminded me. That movie reminded me of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever watched it, but it was kind of the same thing. Really didn't have much of a story to it, but just blasting through the desert in a white Challenger.
Yeah. Well, and then just, fun movies like Cannonball Run, right? And what was what was the other one? Was it Gumball Rally or something?
Yeah.
Which I really enjoyed that. That one was fun to watch.
Yeah.
But, kind of, I mean, when I really think about and think back, like the first, I think I've said this before, the first car movie that it was like, man, this is awesome for me was Gone in 60 Seconds with Nicolas Cage. Like I just remember like everything about that movie. I liked it. And being a younger kid, I wouldn't have caught any like, that's not accurate. That's not how it really be. But I mean, it was a great car movie in my opinion. A lot of chase scenes and stuff. But then like things like Days of Thunder is in my all time like top 5. I love Days of Thunder. But recently movies like Rush, if you haven't seen it, and granted, now I know I'm more into F1 now than I used to be, but like, Rush is really good. Had Chris Hemsworth in it, and then you've got Ford v Ferrari with Christian Bale, and that movie tops my list
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons. But
That was a really good movie.
Yeah, I mean, the story behind it, I mean, it being historically like a true story, but also just Christian Bale's portrayal of the character was great. The overall plot was really good. The cinematography and just the shot, being a photographer and enjoying video, like there was a lot about that movie that I just felt was done right, and it kind of gets your heart pumping while you're watching it. And so it just quickly became one of my all-time favorite like racing movies. It was Ford v Ferrari.
Yeah, I love that one a whole lot too. I mean, that's definitely in my top 5. I mean, I really haven't sat down and thought about it and put everything in like an order, but I mean, for me, it's always just depends on the day, how I feel. But I mean, Smoking the Bandit, it's always gonna be my number one. So you disappeared on me.
Yeah, I had to put Smoking the Bandit in the list. It's in the top 10, right? Because it's a classic and it's, one that I'll always love. When you think about it in terms of a car movie, I mean, granted, the Trans Am was amazing and but I really do. Ironically, I'll put Talladega Nights up there in the top movie just because it's about racing, and it was just it was and I'm not a big Will Ferrell fan, which is what was so shocking that I really really enjoyed that movie just to sit down and have something funny to watch.
And the crazy thing, the times that we're in now, is where Talladega Nights is becoming like a documentary of Cletus's racing career.
Yeah,
which
no
is
doubt.
pretty wild. You can look back and people be like, "Oh, Talladega Nights, that was that movie they, after Cletus McFarland." No, maybe it's kind of like The Simpsons, where they tell the future.
Yeah,
in all their episodes. So. That's what it is.
Maybe so. Hopefully his wife doesn't leave him for his best friend and
then
invite him to the wedding. But I mean, that one's good. And like, so, and then you can almost do its own cat because there's so damn many of them of the Fast and Furious movies and which ones you like the best or the worst. And
the first one.
Well, so the first one's in my top 10, right? But I think the one that, and maybe it's just a product of when it came out, right? But I really enjoyed Tokyo Drift when it came out. I felt like it had a decent story, and maybe that's because it came right after Too Fast, Too Furious, which was just not so much CGI. It just wasn't great. The first one though was definitely a lightning in the bottle kind of thing that it captured like what this underground, right? And so it was kind of like, oh, they made it into a movie, and so it was good in that sense, and I love it.
And
it's
that
a nostalgia
one
thing.
Was before they really started doing all the crazy, long drawn out racing scenes or like over the top cars. It was, I mean, given the Charger was kind of over the top. But at the same time, that was a lot of stuff you would kind of see during that era.
Yeah, there's guys that show up at my local Dairy Queen with something that looks like that sometimes.
Like
it happens.
The Supra and like even the Civics they were using for the heist. I mean, those were the cars that everybody had during that time period. And I mean, it's pretty cool. But
so I Googled like what are the top ranked, like according to Rotten Tomatoes, Fast and Furious movies. And believe it or not, like Fast 7 and Fast 5 are some of the top ones. And then like Hobbs and Shaw is even rated over, which I haven't seen that one, but it's rated like over Tokyo Drift. It's rated over the first one. All of those are rated pretty low. And it's like because of the plot and the heist scenes and all. And like, okay, but if I wanted to watch that, I'll watch Italian Job or Ocean's 11. I'm watching a Fast and Furious movie for cars, and it moved away from that. I know that's been beaten to death, but it's just the truth. Like it's hard for me to go, oh, I want to see that, because it's a car movie. It's just there's something totally different now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, like well, did you ever see what is it? It was like Dirty Larry, Crazy Mary.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it was called. That's a good car movie, and they got a lot of good chases in it. I know that like Freiberger's talked about it a lot. He's a big old car movie fan. I actually love just all older movies like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I guess. I don't
Sometimes
know.
they're hard, like in that one thing they didn't do a lot of was a lot of music backing and stuff, and having the right
Yeah.
soundtrack behind certain scenes really sets a mood for them. And me being a music guy and into photography and cinematography, like I tend to lean to some newer movies for that reason. Like even if it's just a light, orchestral thing that's barely, but you don't realize it, but it's changing how you feel
Yeah.
about that
It
scene.
does.
And there wasn't a lot of that in those movies. Like Bullet, for example. Bullet was hard for me to watch as a kid because I was like, for some reason, I just can't connect to this movie. And maybe that was why. But, speaking of older ones, there was one that I recently came across, and we started subscribing to YouTube TV just to watch racing and stuff and football and whatever else. And I'm scrolling through the stuff that's on TV, and I saw a movie called The Last American Hero. And I'd never watched that. And I scrolled over it, and it talked about running moonshine and stock car racing. And I was like, how have I not heard of this movie? And it's got Jeff Bridges, the dude, as the main character. And like his dad made moonshine, and him and his brother like would run moonshine for the dad. But then they also started a stock car racing team to try to get them out of that life. And he's out having run-ins with the law and all this. And I probably watched like 30 to 40 minutes of it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back and watch this movie beginning to end because it captured me pretty quick. They're staying in hotels the night before a race, like old school NASCAR, you would say. I don't know if you've ever seen the video. The guy's rebuilding a stock car engine in the bathtub at before a race. But so that movie, I was like, okay, this is probably one that I'll be pretty interested in. And so I got to go back and watch it in its fullest. But I definitely enjoyed it.
I know one that is probably will be on my list is Stroke or Ace.
Yep.
That's a good one. I mean, it's Burt Reynolds, Lonnie Anderson, and it's definitely it's from the time period. But they had a lot of good racing. Uh, obviously well before all the CGI stuff. I'm trying to think of another one. I just had it on the tip of my tongue. Oh, Six Pack. I don't know if you ever watched that one.
Nope, I haven't seen that one.
Six Pack with it was a country singer. It's gonna drive me nuts. But no, that one I watched a lot as a kid. The guy was circle track racing, dirt track, and then he had a bunch of like basically orphan kids that were trying to steal his race car parts, and he ended up taking them in and hauling them around in his RV with him, which now thinking about it's like, man, this is kind of like this guy would be on a list today. But
yeah,
but
there's
no,
so
it's a
much you
good,
would not get away with today for
no.
sure. I just put that one on my list. I looked up. It's Kenny Rogers that was in that
Yeah,
movie.
Kenny Rogers. Yeah. And
So there's
I had a VHS copy of that from like where we were recorded off TV, and I watched it a lot when I was a kid.
yeah. So we were cleaning out, the closets and stuff over at Dad's place, and I came across you mentioned VHS tapes. So I have my VHS copy of ET that I used to watch over and over back in the day when I was a kid. But so yeah, I mentioned like I've made a list here of stuff that I want to go and watch. But one thing, if you haven't seen it, is The Fastest Indian. Have you watched that one? So I think it's Anthony Hopkins is in that one, and he is trying to set or the world's fastest Indian. Excuse me, came out in 05. And it's Anthony Hopkins is the main character. He builds Indian motorcycle to try to go set a land speed record at the on the salt flats or whatever. And they have all these serious competitions, and he's trying to make it out there. He's older, losing his health, right? But he wants to go and do it. And all the hurdles he jumps through, and like they don't want to pass tech for him, and eventually let him make a pass, and he has issues with it. But it's because he's out there in a 40-year-old motorcycle trying to set land speed records. And one of the scenes, there's a lot of reels of it going around, or maybe it's just my algorithm, where they're like, these aren't high speed tires. And he goes, sure they are. And they're like, there's all these holes or not holes, but cracks in them and things like that. He goes, and what is the, like, they're smooth, but it looks like you used to have tread. He said, yeah, I cut it all off with a knife. Like he'd sit there and like trimmed the tread off of the tires with a knife to make them high speed tires. I think he had, I don't know if it was his gas tank or something capped with a wooden brandy bottle cork. He was like, that's less weight, I mean, but it's true. Like it was the telling of this guy who tried to set this land speed record, Burt Monroe, and just
And you figure all
super good
that,
movie.
people might look at you and think you're crazy, but that's how people innovate. doing things, trying things, see what works. And it might not always look pretty and be great, but it helps you learn, like, okay, something like this could be could work, and it allows me to do XYZ. So now we just, as technology or research goes on, then you learn what other ways that you can do it that way with better materials.
Well, we probably could go way down the rabbit hole because the tech guys there are like, we can't let you run this.
Yeah,
And he's like, why? And they're like, you don't have a parachute. He goes, well, I'm not planning on stopping. I'm planning on going really fast, and he's like, what about the brakes? And he goes, well, I need brakes to slow down. I'm out there to go fast, and he's just going on and on about how, their thing is from a legal standpoint, how can we let this, and he as an individual is going, I don't care. I'm out here to go fast. I just want to go and do the thing that I've dreamt of doing all my life. And you let some, legality get in the way. But in the society that we live in, if he'd went out there and crashed and burned, they don't know that he doesn't have a daughter that's going to like sue the crap out of you for letting him go out there and run. And so it's kind of a catch-22, I guess, in a way of like, where does personal liberty come in? Where it's like, look, let me sign a waiver, I can't sue, whatever.
Like we always say, safety third.
Yeah, of course. But that's a good one to check out, and I think it's on Netflix or so. It's on one of those streaming services. But I was listening to a Ferrari podcast. I think you heard it when you first joined the studio today. That he did like a review of the Ferrari movie, and the guy that does that Ferrari podcast, he's a service manager for a Ferrari dealership, and so he was kind of talking about what he knows of Ferrari and the history, and then how it lined up with the movie, and like he gave it a 9 out of 10. So and I was like, man, as much as I like Ferraris, and every kid dreamed of an F40 at some point, why have I not seen that movie? And so I put it on my list, and then there's some upcoming ones. I mentioned last time the F1 movie that's coming out on Apple TV. So Jerry Bruckheimer's producer, but Lewis Hamilton, who is, an F1 racer, was also involved in it. So hopefully they keep it pretty true to what real racing is like. They said they had unprecedented access to a lot of the tracks to actually get out and record.
That's
But
awesome.
What I found was really interesting is, because Jerry Bruckheimer is doing it, they're using a lot of the same camera technology they used in Maverick, in the Top Gun movie, and they're utilizing that to get the in-car footage and stuff. But they said they even took it to another level beyond that. So I'm really curious what that means and how the cinematography is going to be in this new F1 movie.
Yeah.
And then,
I can't wait for Talladega Nights 2, starring Cletus McFarlane.
yes, Cletus, if you're listening,
Hell, that would be something.
I'll run the cameras. Yeah. And then so the Dale Earnhardt movie that's coming out on Prime, and I think it's coming out very soon. It's documentary style or whatever. Dale Jr. mentioned it on his podcast and said that it's probably the closest you'll ever be to what it was like growing up with your dad racing, and like seeing some of the more intimate, you're hearing some of the intimate things and what went on in their lives and all of that. He said it's so I guess he's, had advanced access to it and seen it, obviously. And he said it's very good. So I'm excited about that one. Did you ever see the Speed Racer movie that came out?
Yes.
I didn't even know it was a thing. I don't remember it being a thing. Was it any good?
I don't know. It's got some kind of cool scenes, and like if you were into watching the cartoon, it's kind of cool and nostalgic, and to kind of see them where they've kind of made a real looking car that is like that. But if you watch it, it's so unbelievable. I mean, it's done well where it looks good and it looks right within the universe of this movie and like what they're doing. But it's not like would be like a good Die Hard car guy movie, I don't think.
What about the Need for Speed movie?
So that one's not terrible. Like that one, I just remember watching it and it's like, okay, I kind of like the way these Coyote Mustangs look.
So they filmed that in Central Georgia.
Okay.
I was coming home from work one day, and there were cars reversing across a bridge that was going over the interstate, and they'd been all in the news. They're closing this stretch of one of the roads coming out of downtown Macon for that filming. And so I just remember thinking it was so odd, because it's like they were resetting to start to film that scene over again. And I'm coming down the road, and there's all these cars going backwards across this bridge. And I was
Yeah.
like, what in the world? But, they record a lot of stuff at lower speed than what it seems on
Yeah.
camera and stuff. But yeah, that was pretty interesting. They recorded it here. And then I never saw it because it caught a lot of flack, I feel like, when it came out. But I'm going to go back and watch it just because.
Yeah. I remember when it came out and everybody was like, oh, it's just like a 2-hour advertisement for Ford's new Mustang. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. But I mean, we don't have a lot of, like I said, you don't have a lot of car movies that are really coming out nowadays.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
it's hard to, everybody's kind of, all these action movies are so over the top these days. And if you go back to filming movies, car movies, and all the chase scenes, like you were saying, like in a lot of older movies, it was hard for you to watch because it is kind of hard to watch.
Yeah.
You got to have, in order to be successful, they've got to create some sort of storyline, kind of has some sort of, cinematic value to it. And if it's just kind of like me and James recording us driving down the road, talking shit or whatever,
Yeah, who would listen to that?
yeah, right. But I don't know. Okay. I guess it's not a car movie, but me as a kid, when I was watching it growing up, it's a series that I would watch them for. That was Back to the Future, and all three of them. And, those had a good story. They've got the iconic car in it, the different versions of it. And in that movie, I think they did a good job of not over exploiting just the car, but they could have done more with it. But I think those movies are iconic. They're,
Oh, yeah.
a staple. I wouldn't say they're necessarily a car movie, but it's cool. I like it. But when I got older and then, learning more about cars and realizing how much of a pile of shit the DeLoreans were and how much turds they were, I was like kind of disappointed. But I'd still love to just experience one, drive it, just kind of, see how it is. I wouldn't say I'd want to have one right away. I always said I would. But honestly, if I probably drove it, and I'd probably be like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah.
It might be one
So
of those type of deals.
so brace yourself. But I saw this the other day that said, if they made Back to the Future today, and
Oh
he
God.
went back in the same interval that he went back at that time, you'd go back to the 90s.
That's okay. I'd stay there.
Yeah, I mean, I could live with that. Don't get me wrong, but just
Yeah.
yeah,
I
we're old.
know. I know.
We're old. Yeah, I mean, and we probably could do a whole conversation around like movies that aren't car movies but had really cool cars and became, iconic because of it. I mean, I guess you could argue, and if you go into TV series as well, like the Dukes of Hazzard, right? Like iconic car, but the show wasn't about the car, but it, you know, but it was. And then of course there were movies from that, or Starsky and Hutch, right? The Gran Torino.
Well, all right. So I got a good one. All the Herbie movies, The Love Bug,
Yeah,
those,
I remember that.
I've always liked them. And I know several years ago, I was like, man, I used to watch these a lot when I was a kid. I got it for Christmas one year. I think my sister gave me like a DVD that had all the Love Bug Herbie movies on it. And then now they're all on Disney Plus. So
Yeah,
you can get on there and watch them. My favorite one was the Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. I like that
yeah,
one.
yeah,
So my favorite version of it is like, where he's got his race wheels and tires on and they're kind of wide with a deep dish in them.
mm-hmm.
And the car's kind of grungy and dirty looking. I'm like, yeah, I want an old Bug.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of, I toyed with it one because you could find crazy deals on them, and there's probably a reason for it. But like, when the Italian Job came out, I was like, I could drive a Mini; it'd be pretty cool,
Yeah.
And that one, I mean, that's got some cool chase scenes and stuff in it, right? And
Yeah.
that really kind of was about those Minis. I mean, it wasn't about the cars, but they were a central part of that from even the old.
We might. So there's a friend of mine. He might listen. I know he does listen some. He's got a broken down Mini sitting in his garage. And he asked me one time, he's like, hey, want another project? I'm like, I don't need another project. But I think at one time, I don't remember, it had some like maintenance issues with the car. And they were looking at getting a different one. The car had been sitting a while.
Yeah.
And they were talking about just selling it for scrap. And I'm like, what? What?
I'll bring the trailer, man. I've
Yeah.
always just thought they were such cool cars.
Yeah.
Like no
And
matter
like,
what
but
anybody.
they've
Yeah.
got, I think it's their British flag on the roof of the car. And
Oh, dude, that's sweet. I mean,
I
that's
have to, I
straight.
have to see if I can find it, but I know he's in North
Mini.
Carolina.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's not too bad.
oh yeah.
But speaking of people that listen, my wife has some friends, and she's a realtor and works, and I found out through doing real estate photography for a listing of hers that the husband he listens to our show. His name's Frank, and it was really cool to hear that somebody out there is listening. I always love hearing those stories when people come and say
Oh
it.
yeah,
And
I do too.
he's interested in coming and hanging out. He's a dad, and just a super interesting guy. So I'm sure he'll come and sit with us at some point here soon. And with this Riverside app now, it's stupid easy to we
Oh
can all
yeah.
be anywhere. There's if somebody says, "Hey, I want to be a guest," like boom, we can hook it up and have you ready to go in 20 minutes. All you got to do is download an app, right? And it makes it super simple. You can get an external microphone if you want, but being able to bring some folks in is never really easier. And I'm planning to talk to the guy that does the Ferrari podcast. It's called the Prancing Horse Podcast, and I've listened to about 4 episodes of it, and it's really good. And I'd love to have him come on because, like I said earlier, like what kid didn't dream of having a red Ferrari or maybe a yellow one at some point in their life? And so to have somebody that's a service manager for Ferrari come on, I'm sure he'd have all kind of cool stories. So I'm gonna
Well, I hope
ask
you
him to.
know that if this happens, I'm probably going to burn a bridge, and I'm going to ask him what he thinks about people putting the moose symbol on the side of Volvos.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, apparently it's a thing
Oh, okay.
because people say they sound like a mini V.
Nice. Well, so you weren't here when I did like the news, but it's in the 20. I don't think it's for the 2026 season, but I could be wrong. But every few years, F1 changes up the engine architecture. They change. They're doing what is it, V6 turbos right now, right? They're talking about going back to V10s as long as it is a renewable fuel source. So I'm guessing like V10s that are ethanol driven or whatever.
Yeah,
So
ethanol. Yeah, maybe.
so I'm curious to know what all that means, but they've been talking about um, you know, I'm not going back to V10s, and I think that would be wild because just that's a totally different sound than a turbo V.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, honestly, most V6s don't sound great. I mean, you get the inline sixes or inline. And that's one thing I never thought about when I was a kid and just kind of getting into cars. And like a lot of the inline stuff just sounds amazing.
Yeah, yeah, like I like what is it? Cooper, right? He's got the 2JZ in his Camaro, and I know a lot of people love or hate that, however you feel about it. It's obviously working, and he built what he wants to build, and I think that's pretty awesome.
So one swap that I've always been interested in, and it's starting to get a little more popular now, and I'll look into them every now and then, and it's the 6-cylinder Atlas engines from the Trailblazers. They're an inline 6-cylinder. I think they're a dual overhead cam, and you don't really think about them, but people have started swapping them into things and turboing them, and they do really well. And I think a lot of people have said they're kind of like the American Barra.
Yeah,
That, talking about the Barra engines that are a big deal in Australia.
yeah. I mean, I don't know
And
a lot about them, but I know
right, I
what
don't
you're
know a
talking
ton
about.
about them also, but I mean, they have a cool sound to them, and they're plentiful. They're fairly durable for what they are, and you can run them off of uh, just a GM computer. You can tune them with HP tuners. They came in GM vehicles, and
Right.
like a lot of those Trailblazers, I mean, they were junk, but and they had 60Es behind them, but so the engines are plentiful.
Yeah. I don't know if I was a savvy person that a real mechanic that knew what the heck he was doing. I still think it would be cool, like with my OBS, even though I'm doing the LS in it, and that's a much simpler thing. Just slap a Duramax in the thing and have a diesel powered regular cab short bed. And I'm sure
Oh yeah,
logistically there's reasons to or not to do that, but I just
yeah,
think it
yeah,
would be interesting. But I would never have the resources or know how to do it.
yeah. I know a guy. He lives out west, and he's always doing something. He's built a few Duraburbs. I think recently he had just built a short bed, 4-wheel drive, 3/4 ton with Duramax.
Jeez.
Basically, he just shortened the frame. I know he built a short bed, regular cab, all-wheel drive truck using a Tahoe frame. So then the Tahoes and Yukons and Suburban half tons of that GMT 800 era all had like a 4-link in the back instead of leaf springs. They had like coil springs and shocks and then like a 4-link setup. And I think he had to cut a little bit out of the frame. I don't know. I think he used a Suburban frame and shortened it, but I think it's pretty close with a Tahoe frame. I don't remember exactly. But so he shortened a Suburban frame and he put an 80E, and I think it's got like a 6.0 in it and a turbo. And he put the all-wheel drive transfer case and differential from like a Denali or something in it. So it's a pretty cool deal. He said, though, if he were to do it again, that he would have just started with a regular cab or even just a regular truck because it was more work than it was worth.
Right.
But I'm kind of curious on how well that 4-link setup does versus the leaf sprung system.
Yeah.
I do know that the half-ton Suburbans, Tahoes, and Yukons of that era have fully boxed frames, which is pretty cool. But the pickups didn't, which is weird.
Yeah.
But like my Suburban, it's a 3/4 ton. It's got like, I think it's a partially boxed frame. So it's like open through the middle, and then like the front sections are boxed, where the half-ton ones are fully boxed. It's pretty wild. It's a pretty beefy setup.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Like I said, I know it can be done. Like they're slapping diesels in like SN95 Mustangs and stuff and making passes. Like it's obviously doable, but like everything you mentioned, like I know full well I would never have the time or resources, at least not, while my kids are still growing up and living at home and stuff. And, but just because I don't have the know-how, if you,
a lot of it's time and money. And that's, I think, what's slowed me down a lot of my stuff over the last couple of years, just being busy with kids and family stuff and trying to prioritize and then work. So like I said, I'm hoping that with the changes I made, that this next year I want to try to really plan on hitting up more autocross events, maybe some different, I like the cars and coffees or like the kind of like little pop-up meets, just because, I can plan other things around that day other than being there at this one event all day long and just kind of getting burnt out. I can go down there and hang out for a few hours and then go find something else to do in the area while I'm in that area and then come home. So I might try to do some of those this summer. Like I said, maybe take like a day trip over towards the beach and hit up a couple car events. I know there's a big holding group on the Eastern Seaboard here in the state that I'm a member of. So I'd like to go down and try to meet up with a bunch of those guys. That'll be pretty cool.
Yeah. I was never one really for a lot of short trips and stuff until, like when we did that trip to go see the Gassers in North Carolina and then did the NASCAR Hall of Fame Museum, like on the way back. Like that was really an enjoyable trip and like something that I might not have went and done otherwise. Like I wouldn't have thought, but like they have a full simulator where you sit in like a racing seat and everything. And there's like 10 cars in there and you climb into a car, but it's got screens and steering wheel and everything. And you race around one of the, and they pick a single track daily when they do it. And you go in and you like pay and you go sit in the driver's seat of a NASCAR style car, but with a full sim setup and race. And you're racing with the people that are in the other cars and all that. So my son did it, and I can't remember. I think Crystal got in one of them, but I mean, we had a good time doing it. And like I said, I don't know that we would have went to that museum otherwise. So
yeah, well, that's pretty cool.
Definitely. I'm learning, sometimes the shorter trips are better because you can do more different things. You go to a single town for a week.
Yeah.
You've probably done most of the stuff you want to do pretty early on, and then you're just kind of waiting,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, my state in Virginia, you can go pretty much from one side to the other side in 4 hours.
Yeah.
And now I haven't been all the way down to like the western southwest tip, but pretty much like my whole area, Northern Virginia, you know, uh, Southeast, I plan to hit up a lot this summer.
Yeah.
I know we have one track that opened back up near me. I like to go out to a few of their events. They're starting to do like flashlight drags, no prep type deal. It was an 8th mile track. It was always a decent track, and then the last several years it was open. It really started kind of going downhill. The owners just really wouldn't keeping up with it. It needed a lot of maintenance.
Yeah.
And I think whoever owns it now, like I said, they're like, all right, there's a big push in the area to have something. So they're doing, like I said, flashlight, no prep style drag racing out there. And they're doing a lot of tests and tunes. As of right now, I think they weren't wanting to put the money into the timing system, or maybe there was something going on, like waiting on it. I really haven't dug that deep into it, but I do know that some people have been going out to it, and I'd like to try to partake a little bit because that's about 40 minutes for me or so. So that'd be fun.
For sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, speaking of, NASCAR, I think I'm going to do a NASCAR cover photo from that museum, probably for this week's cover on the page. Just do something a little bit different. But yeah, man, I think we're about at time, and I've got to get my butt back in the gym. I've been at best going once a week, so I'm trying to go today and tomorrow and kind of get back in the groove of things. So I think we'll call it here. And
I've been out for a while. But I've been walking a lot these days. So
yeah,
I've been supplementing with that, and I've been walking at least 3 or 4 miles just, during the day at some point. And then the last 2 weeks I was gone, I mean, I know we were walking miles and miles every day. So
yeah.
Plus there was like every day at my lunch, I'd go out for a 2-mile walk after I had my lunch.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I need to be doing. I mean, there's definitely opportunities for me to, find other ways to remain. And I have, like, I've not been in the gym, but like, raking pine straw, getting the yards back in order as the weeds and grass are starting to grow. Obviously, there's stuff to be done there. So, I'm staying active, but being intentional about it and getting out and doing the stuff I know I need to do is,
it's hard.
I got to get back on it,
especially when you get out of it. It's hard to get back into it.
For sure. Well, cool, man. Well, we'll call it there. I'll add in the, the racing news and stuff, and that'll put us a little over an hour today. So, and then all these guests that want to come on, just get in touch with us. I think, you've got the email address, there. We'll post it with the page, but the easiest way to get to us is through the Facebook page for High Octane Dads Podcast. Shoot us a message if you want to come on. Tell us, what you want to talk about, and we'll get something set up. The time is, like I said, it's a lot easier for us to get people on now with using this app.
Oh yeah, it makes things much better. And like I said, we're still trying to figure out a schedule that works well for us.
Yeah, we're obviously, the episode might come out a little later today because we're recording the same day that it should release. But we're making it work with both of our schedules.
Yeah, I don't have any more multiple week work travels coming up this year, I don't think so. That'll be good. If I have any travel days, it's like it'll be 2 or 3 days during the middle of the week versus, like I said, a week and a weekend.
Right.
So yeah.
Cool. All right, man. Well, I guess we'll see you. The next one's gonna be episode 30. So I feel like we got to bring somebody on for it. So we'll figure out who that's
we'll do that. That reminds me, Mikey called me the other night and I missed the phone call. So I have to call him, see what's going on.
So
he said he got my little 4-wheeler running.
Yeah. Okay.
He tried to send me a video of him riding around the yard, but it was like from his wife's Snapchat or something, and it wouldn't allow me to see it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then he said like the carburetor or fuel line was leaking, so he was going back through and repairing that. And he said, basically, he's like, man, I just put gas in it. Which when we got it and like we were looking at the condition of it, messing with it, he was like, honestly, dude, he's like, I might be able to put gas in it and get it running. I said, that's kind of what I figured. I said, but it's a 2-cycle. I don't know much about them. And I said, I have too much else going on. If you want to work on it, awesome.
Well, and I really, 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 I've been seeing a lot of videos of these folks that have built like a go-kart, like oval track in their yard. and I very, very much want to do it. I'm just going to have to
So
get my wife on board. So I guess I'll know pretty soon if she listens to these episodes, because she'll come in and be like, there's no way in hell you're putting a go-kart track in our yard. But I've got at least an acre over here that would
see,
just be perfect for it.
exactly.
And be in
So
the backyard. Nobody'd see it from the road, you know?
a listener and one of my friends reached out to me yesterday, and he's like, man, I don't have the time. I'm not going to get to it. He goes, do you want to buy my full suspension 2-seater go-kart project that I've got? And he's like, he said it needs a seat and it needs an engine, but he's got the original engine with it that'll go with it. But I don't think it's any good, but it's like a full suspension cart. He was like, $150. That's what I've got in it. If you want to come get it. I was like, I will come get it next week.
Nice. Yeah. I want to get one, you know, for the boys and of course my wife, you know, I mean, worried about safety and worried about her kids, and I get it, but like, I don't know, I just had the perfect place that we could either set it up with some chicanes, or I could just do a little oval and we could just get out there and slide around like dirt track racing. And,
Yeah.
you
So
know,
that's what I did when I was a kid. My grandmother's neighbor, a few doors up, he had like a big area. It was probably like a half-acre area, and he had just like an oval. And in the middle of it, they had like a giant like burn pile that they would pile all their limbs and shit in. And we had just made like a big oval around it. And I just remember getting it and sliding around the turns. And
see, we got there's a Confederate rose bush just over here, and like off to the side of it, it's just open all the way around it. And I was cutting grass and I'm circling the thing, and I was like, wait a minute.
Woohoo, left turn.
There's an idea here.
Yeah.
And a little light bulb, you know, it tried and finally, dink, come on, you know. So I don't know. I hadn't been able to get it out of my head, so I'm kind of.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna start working on this. I bought this Manco Dingo, and it came with a Predator 212, and it's got a torque converter set up on it. And I got it running, drove around the neighborhood a little bit with 0 brakes, and it's got like the wrong front wheels and tires on it. So it runs, but it needs some love. And so I've got a brand new Predator 212 or 224 sitting in a box.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to put that on that cart, and I ordered a brand new torque converter setup so it can eliminate the factory one with the jack shafts. And I ordered a disc brake kit that I can adapt to the axle on it. So I'm going to start work on that. I actually, right now, that cart is rolled into the middle of my garage where my Caprice was.
Well, tell your buddy if you're not going to get that cart that he's got, I want it.
Yeah.
Just you pick it up. And I'll come to you and get it, and we'll do an in-person episode about it. But you know, I mean, that's the thing, man. If you had a whole bunch that were all those Predators, right? We could call it the Harbor Freight Go-Kart Racing Series, and then we'll just travel each other's houses. And we'll just travel each other's houses and race go-karts. It'd be awesome.
Hell yeah. All righty.
But cool, man. Well, we're going to call it there because I still got to edit and everything. And then we've got dinner for a birthday tonight. So really enjoyed it. Glad we got to do it. So we didn't miss a week, but we'll be more consistent next week on getting a little bit earlier.
All righty.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too.
Have a good evening, folks.